Yeah, no.
Yes. I don't see the
Yeah.
whole contract though.
Yeah, it's cut off like on the right-hand side. We're seeing your little tools on the,
How about that?
No.
it's
No?
got like a black line over to the right. There it goes.
There you go.
There you go.
And what about the bottom?
So as I
Okay.
scroll up, can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it all.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so this is when you are representing a buyer and you found the property. So it's kind of already filled in because I just added this to a listing transaction that I had. Okay, so the parties to this contract would be the seller, which in this case, we don't need to put owner of record. The seller is Jan Green, and then the buyer would be, I'm just gonna put John Smith. All right, and then the property, land improvement accessories are collectively referred to. And this is where you get this information off of the MLS. Okay, so, and we'll go back through the MLS training, but this is right here called the legal description to the property, and you can get this right off of the MLS from the listing, or you can get it from the tax section of the MLS. And that's basically where we go to get that information. And then Lori, is there anything you want to add to this part right here?
Actually, I just always, it's really awesome if you're representing a seller or a buyer. If you can go on, like if it's Tarrant County, if you go on tad.org and you look up the address, if you scroll down their page a little bit, you'll be able to see like how title's actually vested. That's always best because otherwise, just so you know, at closing, our commitment, the title commitment and the contract, they have to match. So if they don't match at closing, we have to update those names.
Exactly, in the form of an amendment. And sometimes just doing the research on the front end will prevent you having to go back and do so many amendments on the back end.
That's right.
Right, so we've started. Number one is the parties. So you get their information off of the appraisal district, and definitely if you're representing the seller, you could get it off the seller off the appraisal district, as Lori stated, off of their mortgage statement, off of the MLS. If you're representing the buyer, my suggestion is to always use the information that is on their pre-qualification. So that way you won't get the spelling of names wrong and different things like that. So the property, we've told you where to go to find the legal description. And then we're going down to the next section right here, which is exclusions. Okay, the following improvement and accessories will be retained by seller and must be removed prior to delivery or possession. Now, here's why this right here is important. Because if you have, and we're approaching this as though you are representing the buyer. Let's say you're representing the buyer in this case. You walk through the house and they see lovely curtains, or they see a beautiful ceiling fan. What you want to do is you always want to check in the MLS to ensure that the listing agent hasn't said, hey, this property is being sold, but the refrigerator is leaving. It excludes those exquisite ceiling fans. They're going to replace the refrigerator, washer and dryer, everything that you see there with what was originally put there. So this D is important. And where you get this information is by reading your MLS. I can't tell you how many times people submit contracts, but they did not read all the information in the MLS that the listing agent put, and then the property transfers, and then they show up. Oh, well, what happened to those beautiful curtains? This isn't the refrigerator that we saw. Oh, well, your agent did not read all of everything that was on the MLS, and the exclusions need to be here in this portion. So, and then if there's nothing being excluded, everything is being sold the way that it is important that you can do none, or you can put NA. And it's important that you put something there. Lori, do you have anything for that piece?
No, let me just say, I'm just gonna quit. My name's Julie. So
Oh,
I just don't
Julie.
want them to get, it's okay. You
Julie, and I've
corrected
been calling
yourself.
you Lori forever. I just think you
It's
look
okay.
like
I just
Lori.
don't want them to get confused on who I am. That's all. That's the only reason. But we don't really have anything to do with that particular one. That's not something that we look at, just so you know.
All right, and please forgive me. Don't hold it against
It's
me.
okay.
I rename everything, even my
It's
kids.
Monday.
My son said that today. I called my oldest son, my youngest son's name. He's like, Mom, I'm not Aaron, I'm Michael. Like, that's like the third time you've done that. So please,
I do
Julie,
it too. No worries,
Julie, I
Nicole.
apologize. I
No
do
worries.
apologize. All right. So now we're going to move down to number 3, the cash price. So the cash portion would be their down payment. Okay, so if you are going FHA, typically FHA is 3.5%. Conventional can be anywhere from 5% to 20%. So just for the sake of going through this, we're going to say that we have a sales price of 350,000. This person, we're going to say, is going FHA. So 350,000 FHA, the down payment, which goes here, is 3.5. So I'm going to get 3.5% of 350,000, which is 12,250. Okay, now this part is also very important, because if they are doing a third-party financing, meaning they're getting a loan, you want to make sure that the third-party financing addendum box is checked. Okay, so now now you want to, so the house is selling for 350,000. So now you take 350,000 minus their down payment. So 337,750 goes there. So you always want to remember that the cash portion, which is typically the down payment. Now, hear me, this is not all of the money they have to bring to closing, because down payment and closing costs are 2 different numbers, right? Down payment is what everyone has to have if they're going conventional or they're going FHA. Now, there are some 100% conventional loan programs out there, but just for the sake of this training, we're using 3.5. We're going to say they're going FHA. So this number and this number equals the 350. And then here, if there are no residential leases or no fixture leases or natural resource leases. Now, Julie, is there anything you want to say about this section of the contract?
The only thing, and this will kind of follow through with a contract. When there's a addendum or an amendment attached, we're going to come after you for that addendum or amendment. So basically what I'm saying is, if you check that box there, then I definitely need to have that third-party addendum, attached to your contract. That Jennifer's really, and she's going to help you through, like, whenever you send a contract, if she catches something, she will definitely get a hold of you and let you know that, hey, we're missing an addendum. And you'll see further on in the contract, there's going to be a lot of boxes, and those are basically, but we do look to make sure that third party financing is checked. And then we do follow the third party financing when we're doing the figuring on our side. Because every once in a while, the lender will come back with questions for us when it's like a conventional or an FHA. There's certain requirements they have with the title company as well.
Okay, thank you. So residential lease, typically this box refers to duplexes or multi-family units. Now, there are cases where a landlord could have had his property as an investment property, and there was a current lease there. And so if there were a current lease intact and your buyer is purchasing the house, then they would have to honor the residential lease. Fixture leases is like security systems, or and sometimes it can include solar systems, stuff that hasn't been bought, that is leased and thus attached to the property. And whoever is purchasing the property will have to get those addendums and understand that purchasing the property, that they have to honor the current leases. And then the natural resource leases, which is oil and gas, that whoever owns the property or has the right to those property leases, they have to be made aware of that. Okay, so Julie, I'm gonna let you take number 5.
Okay, I'm going to take number 5, but I want to add on leases really quickly.
Okay.
If you ever, the fixture leases, so with those, if you're the listing agent, okay, if there is solar panels, HVAC systems, water systems, anything like that, and they're like paying your seller, your owner is paying a lease every, like they pay a certain amount every month. It does what we call a UCC filing. It will show up in our search. And the only thing I want to point out about that is writing a timely contract. Okay. Because those UCC filings, you need to figure out with your seller whether or not they, or that when you find the buyer, they have to accept a transfer, or if your seller wants to pay it off and be done with it. Or they can transfer it to the new buyer. So those are all questions we're going to have for you immediately. When that UCC shows up on title, it'll show up on Schedule C as a requirement. And we need to know whether or not we have to remove it, or if it's going to transfer to the buyer, because then we have to get a hold of the UCC filing company, and we have to get the correct paperwork from them to, number one, transfer it. They usually have conditions. Sometimes I'm doing one right now that has a $250 fee. So I'm just making you aware, and a UCC filing is not a lien per se. All it is it's telling people out there that there's a monthly payment on their property that has been fixed to the property. Okay. And UCC filings are tricky. And a lot of my agents don't know anything about UCC filings, and it's really important. And Nicole, I'd love to do a quick class on that, or even 15-minute conversation on it.
Oh, definitely.
So those are very important.
Okay, Lisa had her hand raised. She had a question.
Okay.
So typically when it comes to those solar panel transfers, is that something that you guys handle? Because I dealt with one and they didn't talk to me. They didn't answer questions for me or anything. So it was very frustrating. And
I'm really good with,
like they didn't understand what was going on, and they were the only person that the solar company would talk to.
the title company.
No, the solar company would only talk to the seller.
Oh, I don't, I'll be honest with you, Goodleap. And I mean, I even know them off the top of my head because I work with them so often, and I even know how to get around them. And I can get a temporary list for refinance. I mean, I'm good with the UCC filing. So no, I'll walk you through it. And honestly, yeah, they might need an authorization from your seller sign, or they can give permission, but they're definitely allowed. And I don't ever see, that's one of the stresses I try to take off of your sellers, is because UCC filings are very confusing. People don't understand. They think it's a lien on their property all of a sudden. And they didn't say anything about putting a lien on, you know what I mean? So they get upset. And
Mhm.
that's not what we want to do. We just want to make it, aware, hey, do you want to transfer that monthly payment that you're paying for the solar panels, or do you want to just pay it off? And I don't usually go too much more in detail. Okay, if you want to do either one of those, all I need for you is to sign this authorization. I'm going to take care of it. Like
Oh,
once they give me their choice, I don't want them to have to deal with it anymore.
that's good.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that's great.
Okay,
Because
okay,
I was a little gun shy about, any more that has solar panels on them.
okay. And I try real hard not to bother client. I don't ever want your clients to feel overwhelmed. Like I know how stressful buying and selling a house is. I just sold my daughter and I was involved with her transaction last July, and I thought I was going to strangle her because so she's, every day, 15 times a day, she was calling because she didn't understand. And so my job is if they want more explanation, of course I'll give it to them. But do they need to worry about it when they're trying to pack 400 bucks? You know what I mean? Like, so no. All I need is an authorization form when it comes to the UCC filings, and I will deal with it like as much as I possibly can without bothering your customers.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a great question, though.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you so much, Julie. All right,
Mhm.
so now we're on number 5, earnest money and the termination of option. All right, so typically earnest money is 1%. However, there's nothing stated, is 1% of the sales price. However, there is no law or rule that says it has to be like that. So if you're working with a client who resources are low, you could put $1,500, you could put $1,000, but keep in mind that when you're submitting your offer to the seller, having a strong earnest money is what you want to have here. So this is real important. And this earnest money part, it goes back to who's paying for title. So in this case, we're saying that we're going to say that we're representing the buyer on this transaction. And for some reason, the buyer decided that they're going to pay for the title. So with that being said, we're going to deliver to, and then here is where we would put Julie's information. So we're going to put capital title.
And we usually like if you'll put a dash and it Julie. You don't even have to put my whole name. You can put a dash and Julie, or a dash and Shayna, or a dash and it, because there's 4 escrow officers in my office. So it does make it easier when these contracts come in.
Okay, and then the address is
1150 North Carroll Avenue.
1150. Okay, South Lake. And then, so this contract is 350,000. So I'm going to say the earnest money is 3,500 because it should be a percent. And this option fee, period, this option fee is real important. I'm going to put $150 in for the option fee. The option fee gives the buyer the unrestricted right to cancel the contract for however many days. So here you see termination B right here. So we're going to request 7 days, and we're paying $150 as option fee. And then it says the earnest money and option fee shall be made payable to the escrow agent and may be paid separately or combined in a single payment. Now, this is new because title back, just months ago, they would not take option fee. But now these can be made in one singular payment, and it's made to the title company in the form of a cashier's check. Now, Julie,
Mhm.
do you all take personal checks for earnest money?
Yeah, we do take personal checks for earnest money, and we do have where you can actually submit your check online. So it's kind of like we won't do it through an app. They've had a lot of problems with the apps, and we have an online app, but you have to do it from the computer check. But I mean, you can do it from your phone, but you'd have to be on Safari. Does that make sense? And Jennifer will send out a welcome letter that'll give your buyer all the instructions to do that, or wire it, or who to make it payable to as a cashier's check. We'll even provide a FedEx label if they want to overnight it.
Okay, and so team, I know many of you like, oh wow, this is a lot of information. The great thing is when you get ready to do your first contract, you will definitely have access to myself or to Julie
Right.
or her team. And also, I'm going to have a contract that is fully completed so you can go back and reference. So right now, the contract that we're working on is a 1 to 4 family contract. We are representing the buyer and they are going FHA. They put down 3.5%. Sales price is $350. And so far they are financing $337,750. We've already established that this is the title company we're using. We're using Capital Title. Our escrow officer or escrow agent is going to be Julie. Now, like in Ishandra's case, they are located in South Lake, but they have offices all over the DFW area. So we could still send our contracts to Julie and she will make arrangements with the local Capital Title that's nearest to the buyer, that we're representing, or the seller that we're representing, and they can drop off their money there. So they do not have to go all the way to South Lake, nor do they have to go all the way to South Lake to close. We can close at a title company or an office that is closer, and Julie would make those arrangements for us.
It's just good when you're building a team to be consistent with the people you work with so that everybody stays on the same page all the time. So even though you have, let's say you have a property in Houston, I can still handle the contract. I'm licensed anywhere in Texas. We have Capital Titles all over Texas. I'm going to make sure that your customers and clients, they're going to get the same great service. You know, when it comes down to the wire, we'll make sure that they're well taken care of.
Okay, so thank you so much. Now we're going to move to the termination, and the termination option. This is important, and we'll go through this. And even if we have to do it when I'm meeting with you one-on-one, so that you can know when you're sitting down with your buyer how to go through this. But for the sake of time on tonight's training, I'm kind of just going to highlight this. I know that it's a lot, but at least you'll have an overall idea of what needs to be filled in and what that section means. So right now we're at the termination option, which is 5B. This gives your buyer the unrestricted right to terminate contract. Now, typically what is happening in this 7-day period, this is where inspections are being done. This is where you are now submitting an amendment for repairs or amendment to adjust sales price because of what you have found in the inspection. Or sometimes, buyers go to sleep, they have a bad dream. Oh, I'm so scared, I don't want to move forward. Fine. It only costs them $150, and their $3,500 earnest money is released to them, and it goes back, and then you can start your search all over.
And the
So
150 would go to the seller.
yes, and the $150 goes to the seller. That is the cost to the seller for taking their property off the market for the 7 days while you get inspections and get over your fears, what I call it. Okay, so title policy and survey. Okay, so here, title,
Tricky.
go ahead.
I was just saying, this is the tricky part. This is where you'll want to really pay attention.
Right, so the title policy, in my experience, for the most part, has always been a seller's cost. Now, in recent times, because buyers have been trying to get more competitive in the way of winning, when there we have 5, 10 people bidding on one house, buyers would be like, hey, look, I'll pay for all of the costs. I'll pay for the title policy. But typically, when you're submitting an offer and representing your buyer, typically you want to select the seller to pay title. And if the seller is paying title, then they get to choose who the title company they use. Now, since we said that we're going to pay for title, we will click this box at the buyer's expense. And then here, I'm going to put capital title. Okay. And then now, Julie, I'm going to let you take over. Do you want me to explain this part, or do you want to go ahead and jump in?
Yeah, I'm going to touch lightly on it tonight because I'd really like some more time to go over more about this, like with surveys, you know, when we do
Okay.
a survey. So I'm going to go over, I'll kind of do my spiel like I do at the closing table.
Okay.
And just one thing I want to add to who pays title policy, it is always okay to try to negotiate and get your title company in there. And whether you're buyer, seller, whoever's paying it, if you're writing the initial contract, write it in there and wait for somebody to cross it out, because it's always best to try to get your people on your contract. They will come back usually and counter it, but that's, you know, that's neither here nor there. But you can put that the buyer's going to pay the title policy, but they're still going to choose. So, you know, I'm just kind of letting you in with that. Now for that right down, but what is that? I and 2 and like the 2-8 under number 8, there's 2 check boxes there. Okay, so what this relates to is what we call an R16 or amended survey coverage. Okay, this is an extra little pro on their policy that they can get, and it covers it adds additional coverage. So basically, if you buy a property and the fence at the time, you know, you don't get a survey, but the existing, they say there haven't been any changes, but the wind blew it and it's now a foot off of their property. So sometimes, like when you have that amended survey coverage, it's going to help pick up all those expenses. It's really very, very cheap to have. It's like if it's only a percentage of the property. I don't see these, you know, on our normal standard properties, they're $50. And I'll be honest with you, I've had a lot of disputes that have been able to use this this amended survey coverage. So if your buyer's paying the owner title policy, you still can choose whoever wants to pay for the additional survey coverage too. But if you're writing for your client, I would always put that in there. Now, you don't if you're going to have a new survey, like if there isn't an existing survey, it's obviously not as big of a deal, but I would still highly recommend it, because what happens on your new builds, you know, like basically their fence lines can still be over, right? Another thing that the R16 will do is sometimes your surveyor goes out of business, or they're no longer around. But you want to use that. You don't want to pay the whole $450. If that survey is incorrect, then we can help get it corrected with another surveyor and pay the cost to update it. So there's a lot of different little nuances. Surveys are extremely important, and they don't require them in Texas. Capital Title does not require a survey to do a refinance, but your lender probably is, because we cannot update Schedule B on our title commitment, which we will go over eventually, with exceptions and everything. We can't update that without a survey. So surveys are really important. And I will tell you that I did title up in Ohio. It's so different up there. You have to get a new survey on every property, and they are always over $2,000, even on a lot and block. It's crazy. It's crazy. So Texas isn't so bad. My surveyor does them for $535 out the door, $535.84 for standard lot and block.
Right, and typically the survey is ordered by the lender, or do you guys do that?
No, we do that.
Okay.
Yeah, lenders don't order. Yeah, we do. We order it because they need our commitment in
Okay,
order to complete the survey. They actually go off of what they're looking for is everything in our commitment shows everything that's recorded at the courthouse, all the easements and restrictions and setback lines. Our commitment's going to show it because it's going to pull those records from the courthouse. So they use our commitment to build their survey.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good to know. And then you said your surveys are 545?
535. They're actually 495 plus tax, so it's 535.84. It's cheaper than anybody else that I know of right now. And we have a good relationship with them, so I am able to get surveys pretty quickly.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So now we are going here to decide who is paying for survey.
Right.
So go ahead, Julie. I'll let you.
You want me to explain this one? Because
Yeah,
this
you
is
can.
kind of important. A lot of agents have a real hard time understanding. So say your buyer, there's no survey on the property. It's a cash deal. You don't need a survey to close, by the way, on a cash deal. But your buyer wants a new survey. You are not going to check box number 1. You're going to check box number 2. Okay.
Right. It's cash, right?
Now, if it's a regular and they're stating they have an existing survey, you want to give them at least and I think Nicole did you have 7 days in there?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
put
I
10.
like 5 to 7 days to give the seller 5 to 7 days to get that to us. I mean, usually we like to get them the day of if we can. I love when contracts are turned in with the surveys. At your listing appointment, you should probably always ask to see if they have one. It's a very important question. So basically what this first one says is if they do have an existing survey and a T47, not one or the other, has to be both. Okay. So you'll want during your listing appointment, you want to see the survey and then you'll write a T47 affidavit, and then you'll go ahead and you'll submit it to us to see if we can get it approved. Now, if we can't approve it, that's where those little boxes down at the bottom of number 1, that's what those are for. If we can't approve it, who's going to pay for it?
Right.
That's what they'll say. She's marked it's going to be a buyer's expense if a new survey is needed. So if the existing survey cannot be approved, then the buyer's going to pay for it.
Right.
Now, if there is an existing survey and the seller never ends up providing it, or they're outside of that 7 days, then it's a seller expense.
Right, absolutely. So just keep in mind, so right now, okay, so I'm just going to keep it on the from a buyer perspective, but just like Julie said, if you were representing the listing agent, when you go in and you are getting your listing agreement signed and everything is done electronically, but once they agree, the documents that you want to collect is the survey. You want to get the T47, signed. Now, Julie, in the past, what I've done as just to make things more convenient for my clients, unless the other agent that I was working for demanded it be notarized up front, typically the T47 would be notarized at closing by you all.
Yes, and that's fine. We would just, I'll be honest with you, Nicole, at closing, you're always going to fill out a new well, I'm going to fill it out, but they're going to sign it and I'm going to notarize it the day of closing. And here's the reason why. What if you have the house listed at you've got it listed for 6 months, you did the T47 right away. Well, there's 6 more months to prove that you haven't changed anything. You may have got discouraged and said, oh, let's just go put the pool in, and we'll just stay here. Well,
Exactly.
at that point, so I want it all the way up to closing. I want the seller confirming that there haven't been any changes. So at closing table, we're going to do a T47. As long as your other agent's okay with it not being notarized, that's fine by us.
Okay. All right, perfect. And again, we're going to go into this in a lot more detail so that you guys can become very, very familiar with the contract. I think this document is going to be one of the documents that you use the most. So, again, just for the sake of time, we're just going to go through this just so that you have an overall view of how to complete a 1-4 from a realtor standpoint, and then from a title standpoint. And as Julie stated, there's a lot of parts of this that will require a more in-depth explanation, and we will be providing that through our trainings. So objections, you can put none or residential use only. Julie, do you have anything about this particular space?
We skip right over that one. That one doesn't really pertain to us. Sometimes that's basically just agreement between buyers and sellers.
Right. And this is basically like about the deeds and encumbrances. So for the most part, they can't go in and turn the house into a store or make it commercial. So
Right.
for the sake of this contract, we will put residential use only, and then title notices. Here, is the property a part of a HOA? Okay, and for the sake of this example, we're just going to say that it's not, because if it were, then there's supporting documents that have to come into play, as we talked about the T47. So if we said it was an HOA, then we would need to get a resale addendum that would need to be accompanied with this 1-4 before we turned it into but before we gave it to Julie. So we're going to move past all of this. And then the property condition. So number 7, typically we want to have the seller's disclosure already uploaded in our transactions desk. So if you are representing the seller, then you would have gotten the T47 complete. You would have got the seller's disclosure. You would have received a copy of the survey. Those documents would be uploaded into transactions desk. And let's just say the seller on this particular transaction did their job great, and you already have the seller's disclosure. Let's say they didn't, and it's not in the transaction desk. They typically have 3 days to get us that seller's disclosure. All right. So for the sake of this, we'll just say it wasn't in transaction desk, and the seller's agent would need to get you the seller's disclosure in 3 days. And the seller's disclosure is a form that specifies everything the current seller knows about the property. Did it have a new roof? Were there any repairs? Did the property ever flood? Does it have a sprinkler system? Is it gas or electric? You know, just everything they know about the property. They'll fill that form out and give it to you. Okay, and then typically they'll say, oh, we saw the house, we love it, we're accepting it as is. Now, if you are representing the buyer and you're walking through the property and they love everything, but they notice that there's a hole, you know, or crack in the tile. They love the house, but before you get an inspection, just on initial walkthrough of the property, I see where, oh no, I want them to repair that. So we will put it here, repair cracked tile. Okay, but let's say you're walking through, everything looks great, they love the house, the next step is an inspection, then we would use it, buyer accepts the property as is. Now keep in mind, This box does not mean that they are buying the property as is. It means they are submitting their offer as is until they get inspections. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right, and then number 8, broker and sales agents. This right here, you would have to disclose if you are selling your own property. So if you are selling your own property and then you're doing any type of intermediary, which means you're representing yourself and or the buyer, no matter what, you have to disclose in the MLS, and you also want to disclose on the contract that the seller, well, the buyer would say it, you would see it on the MLS, and it would say, you know, the seller is a licensed real estate agent. And if you were selling your own property to a buyer, you would have to put that notice here. And then, so for the sake of this, it's not applicable, so we're going to put NA there. And then closing typically takes place within 30 days. So if we show the house and our buyer absolutely loves it, we would go from 30 days from here. And typically I close Wednesday, Thursdays, or Friday. So let's just say a Thursday, just in case something happens. We still have that extra day Friday if Julie needs to catch something or whatever. The only thing about Friday is if something happens, then we have to wait all the way until Monday to make it to closing. So we're going to set closing for Thursday. Julie, do you want to add anything here?
We do like to close in the morning to try to get, just so you know, with scheduling. That as far as the closing date goes, when it comes down to scheduling, Jennifer's going to try to get them to sign prior to 11. We can sign a little bit later, but probably not past 1 if we want to try to fund that day.
See, and that's good. And typically it takes you how long to fund?
We have to wait on the lender to review docs, so it's always going to depend on how long we have to wait on the lender, you know, which lender we're working with, for example. Wire cutoff is 4:30. We can sometimes stretch it to 4:45, but they really get upset with us. And when I say that, that means like seller might not get his proceeds, and please be fair, even on a buyer side, you always want to make sure, because Friday they wouldn't get their proceeds till Monday, you know, and so that kind of stinks for the seller when they have to wait all those couple days, you know.
Okay. All right. So the next one now we have is number 10. Now this is important because if you have a seller and you've read on the MLS that the seller wants a week lease back, then you're going to put according to a temporary residential lease from a promulgated by TREC or other written lease agreement. All right. If the seller is not requesting any type of lease back, then the buyer takes possession after it closes and funds. So the seller would actually already have to have their money in hand or in their bank account before you could actually tell your buyer they can get the keys. So in the example Julie just gave us, like, let's say, you know, you had a late closing, it didn't fund. Well, they would have to wait until the next day to get keys. So this is why scheduling is so important, because if you schedule for Friday evening and then it doesn't fund, then guess what? The title companies are closed. The funders and all of those things are closed, and it's not until Monday. So if they were planning to move that weekend, guess what? I don't know where they're going to be with their things, but that's why if you can possibly, if you are going to close on a Friday, close early in the morning. But my recommendation is, if possible, don't close on Fridays, but that's just me.
All right.
So
Yeah,
anyway, yeah, you too. So, okay. Closing and funding. So that's number 10. Julie, did you have anything you want to add to this?
Not related to that. That we usually leave up to you. We always give you the best alternatives for closing. So that's about that.
Okay. And then special provisions, I'm sure each and every one of you have heard in your real estate classes, we are not to write law, like we cannot practice law, right? And typically there is no need that we would use special provisions because typically there is an addendum or an amendment that may be necessary. Now, Julie, are you aware of any situations where something would be written in special provisions?
I would never, ever, ever advise writing anything in there unless you talk to your attorney. And if you need attorney advice, I have an attorney that you can speak with to see if it's okay to put it in there and how to word it. Because one little word out of place can make a whole disaster. So,
Absolutely.
you really shouldn't put anything in there I would always say, if you need to change a name, do something, add an amendment. Don't
Right.
put anything at number 11. Yeah.
Right. So again, you would put NA or just none, just nothing goes there. Typically, an amendment or an addendum would take care of anything that you're trying to do here. Okay, so settlement and other expenses, this is number 12. The buyer is saying, okay, well, I need help with down payment. So they're gonna attempt to ask the buyer is gonna ask the seller for $3,500 seller credit or a seller concession.
Mhm.
Right? So that would go there. This is if they need help, and we can talk more about this, but this is an important piece. If you feel like the property is priced right and you really want to win the deal, I might increase the sales price and then almost kind of have them give it back to them through the contract. But we can speak about that more in detail. Julie, anything you want to add to that?
Nope, we just put that in there and we'll make sure it gets taken care of at closing.
Okay, perfect. All right, and notices, this is where you would put your buyer's information. Now, for me, the way I do my contracts is because I do not want the listing agent calling my client. What I do is put their name, and I put their email address, and that's all I put here. And then, the seller, if you have the seller's information, then you would put their name and their email. Julie, do you have anything extra about number 21?
Yeah, if Jennifer and I will not usually we even try if it's on notice, we are allowed to contact them. And I mean, that's the rule. But honestly, we still don't contact them unless usually a lot of my agents that I've worked with for a long time, they'll tell me right in the email whether or not they want me to talk to them directly. And then they'll give me a name and a phone number. So I don't even barely look at notices unless I have to, if I have to make contact. Because we like to do as much, like I said, I don't want any stress on your buyers and sellers. So I'm going to do whatever I can to leave them out of the picture as much as possible, unless we have to get information. And I'm going to let you ask them the questions that's needed. The only thing we do need, and that'll come off of that, we've got to have seller and buyer information forms. All the information on these forms that will come out with the welcome letter, and we need those back as soon as possible. It helps us complete our search and it helps us prepare the documents we need for closing. So basically we've got to have those back. They'll come with your welcome letter and wire instructions and everything right out of the get-go, so that we can have all that information. The notices, that's great if you put it in there, but I wouldn't advise it because of what Nicole says. I would never want to give the other agent my client's information. But if you give me
Exactly.
and if you give me permission through an email to speak with your client, then I will do it at that time.
Exactly. So just a good rule of thumb is name and an email, and then the title company will reach out to both the seller and buyer to get all the information they need.
Right.
Now, just for the sake of a contract, look at all the possible addendums plus
Mhm.
that could go with a particular contract. So for the sake of this one, the only thing we're adding is a third-party financing addendum. The seller did not want a temporary lease, so we're not going to do that. We're not doing an HOA addendum or anything like that. So the only thing we need is the third-party financing addendum. All right. And then there is no buyer's attorney. And then
Very important. Jennifer will run after you if that executed date. Nope, keep going.
yes, right
The
here.
executed date, yeah, because if that date's not in there, it's not a contract. It's not it's not fully executed. So just always
Exactly.
make sure, yeah, when you turn them in, that you've got a date in there.
Now, so she's speaking if you were representing the seller. We do
Mhm.
not put the execution date in for this particular scenario because we are sending it as an offer to the seller's agent. They
Mhm.
will review everything that we've put in here, and then they will decide if they want to accept it. If they accept it, they will send it back to us with that executed date, and there'll be a timestamp. If they make changes, then they'll send it back with the changes. And then if we agree, we'll initial the changes and then we'll execute. So it really does determine who is the last person with the contract as we go back and forth to work through all the terms that are in the contract. And then, so these would be electronically signed.
And one quick thing with when you're signing, I have a lot of calls from agents and I don't want you guys to hesitate. If it's in a trust or it's, it's a LLC or something like that, and you want to know exactly how they need to sign, just give me a call or even shoot me an email and I'll give you the signature and the way they need to sign it.
Yes, that's so important. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Mhm.
Yes, and we can talk more about that later. And then here is you'll get from the MLS, the other broker's information. This is where your information and our broker's information would go. And then here you definitely want to always remember to put and look on the MLS how much you're getting paid. Some, it could be 2.5, it could be 3. Plus, the listing agent could be offering a bonus. So you want to make sure that it goes there for the sake of this. On the MLS, we know that it said 3%, right? Because those are the houses we're selling. And then the title company will receipt as they get earnest money and everything like that. So I
It'll
know,
be sent immediately over to you as well.
right? So I know that was a rush.
Yes.
So